Welcome to Your Wealthy Self with me, Regina Martinelli. This show is about money and a whole lot more. Here we focus on being able to expand your capacity for money, success, abundance, and inner wealth. And for you to have what's most important to you both inside and out, so you too can be your wealthy self. And today is one of those days where we get to talk about a whole lot more. Today we are continuing our conversation on women's self-sovereignty and why it's so important. And for those of you who this may be unfamiliar topic, what I mean is it's about having authority over yourself, your life, and how you choose to create it. You don't have to people please, dim your bright light to make somebody else happy or not feel bad about where they are. You don't have to prove your worth or deserving by augmenting your struggle to have what you desire. And your self-sovereignty is also your birthright. And my guest today is Karina Trowbridge, who is a divorce guidance coach, but it's way more than that. She helps women navigate the journey of divorcing a high conflict person and get out of that trauma loop so that they can retain a strong sense of themselves as they embrace their newfound independence and lead a secure and fulfilling life on their own terms. Okay, Karina, I loved our, oops, I gotta put you on. There you are. Hi.
Hey.
I loved our first part of the chat on last week's episode. So if any of you haven't seen it, please go back and watch it because we're going to pick up the conversation right where we left off. So now let's dive into this amazing topic even more deeply. When we left off, I had asked you about high conflict people, and you said there's this thing that you do called BIF, which is brief.
BIFF, which is brief. This is a Bill Eddy concept. It's brief, informative, friendly, but firm.
Awesome.
And it's really awesome.
So we had just run out of time as I was asking you, as your clients use this with their high conflict, it could be your spouse, your boss, your sibling, your parents. When you do this enough with that high conflict person, what happens in that dynamic?
Okay, two things I would say. One is I can tell you how I morphed the BIF into a rapport with boundaries statement, if you want me to do that.
Please.
And then, because that kind of illustrates how we kind of get some movement to actually change the dynamic. So you can sort of like begin to see where you may be in a cycle of abuse. And then in real time, notice where you are in that cycle and step out of it, right? Mm-hmm. So if there's a lot of things I could say, but the statement that I like to use that is Bill Eddy's BIF, brief, informative, friendly, but firm statement with a little bit of mirroring neurons, magic, and NLP in it is, I appreciate that you. Okay. So
you start communications that way.
Yeah. So I have a lot of clients that will text me because there's a big argument about finances, like, why did you spend that much on the Visa bill? Or I can't believe you did this, and it's a text message, or it's in person in a meeting. And so a good way to kind of step around that pitfall, right? Right? Because we don't want to, right? Like sometimes there's just no point in engaging in that question. That's not really a question, right? It's meant to be controlling.
Yeah, because the why question isn't really going to it's not going to be a good enough answer. It's not like, well, our kid was dying, we needed to pay the deductible at the hospital, because it would have said that. It's actually kind of a leading question.
Right. So let me just say really quickly, I say, is the person asking for information? Give them information. Are they asking you a question to have an effect on you? Leave it alone. Are they saying something to you to give you information? Accept it. Thank you. Are they telling you something to have an effect on you? Leave it alone.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's really helpful. And so on this magical BIF statement, so it's a question about why did you spend $2,000 on therapy? Okay. Finances, but it's about finances. So to think about this a little bit ahead of time. I appreciate that why do we do that? Because Bill Eddy will say, this is partly Bill Eddy, he'll say that when we say I appreciate it, we get their attention. And so what I would say is when we go back to the rapport comments that we were making before, yeah, when you say I appreciate, they definitely perk up, and it is a little bit like mirroring, like the mirroring that you would get from a primary parent. I appreciate that you, and then you fill in your core value here,
Ah.
little social cue. I appreciate that you are prioritizing finances. Okay, now Bill Eddy says, that's my thing, insert the core value there, because we're just like, right? It's just a little reminder about what we're actually talking about so that we can have our personal sovereignty, full
Yes.
self-expression, and our authentic self, right? And then the next thing is give a gift. That's what Bill Eddy says. And Bill Eddy says, for some reason, when we give a gift, they want to give a gift back. And so we know mirroring neurons, right? When we smile, somebody will smile back. So the way we give a gift is I will send you the accounting for the expenses. I am also prioritizing finances. I have been prioritizing finances, and I will continue to do so. I have created a great budget that's working well, and I'll continue to work within my budget. Those are all gifts. And then we have the boundaries part. But therapy is a must have. Therapy I definitely am going to pay for each month, and it'll be about 2,000. But I'm not willing to blah blah blah. And Bill Eddy says, for some reason when we say but not this, when we create a boundary and we say not this, and you and I will, the work that we've done, what you and I know is that creature neurology is kind of like, oh, that didn't work. So it will try something new. And it's almost like saying that manipulation didn't work. So we'll try something new. So I appreciate that you are prioritizing finances. I've been prioritizing finances, and I will continue to do so, but I will keep paying for therapy. That's really important to me. And here's the kicker. This is the part that I created that I think is really important.
Yeah.
Let's keep talking about it and see if we can't find something that works for both of us. Because what that does is it signals that it's not your rules, that this has to be a consensus. And it sort of takes out all the charge.
Oh, I love it. Takes out all the charge. Okay. And
So
when
to
you,
answer your question, and I'll answer your question if you want. Okay, so we have that little background. If we do that kind of thing enough times where we're sort of checking our prior patterns where we would respond to a text within 10 minutes or an email within an hour. Now we're sort of extending the response times. Now we're sort of changing the dynamic. And when we're speaking in this way, what happens is we take the hit that they get when they get to feel superior. It's like
the high or the
charge or the high is a little bit about putting you in your place, having you be inferior and having them be superior, right? So when we can reduce that charge, it's not fun anymore. And then it will naturally dissipate until it just stops. And actually, what I love about this is it's really in everyone's best interest. It really holds everyone in the highest. So eventually that person can learn how to actually engage with me or with my client. And we may actually be able to have a good relationship. Or, okay, let's say this. We may be able to have satisfactory conversations where we actually get something done in the conversation.
Oh, I love that. And that just is, as you said, better for everybody. Everybody's nervous system, everybody's anxiety, everybody's sense of feeling safe, everybody's sense to communicate. It's
And
good
that
for
feeling of
everybody.
being heard, right? Like everyone gets to feel heard.
Right. So I have to ask, when you do this enough with a high conflict person and they're not getting their high from picking on you and making you the target and coming at you, is there any repercussions? Like, do they then try more, bring in a bigger bat, or a bigger dose of anger? What have you seen, or what can we do about that?
Super, super, super important question. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason that I created all of this, or the reason that I used Bill Eddy's strategies, or the stuff that I've learned through transformational NLP, is to avoid a concept called splitting, which is a psychological term. It's not splitting from your boyfriend. It's that aspect. It's the way that we split from ourselves that high conflict people do when we sort of fall off our pedestal and then they have us be from all good to all bad, because it is a binary system. There is a polarity. It's either all or nothing. It's either black or white.
Right. It's where they're searching for like being guilty or being innocent.
Yes.
And, in order to be innocent, somebody else has to be guilty. So they're constantly in this toggle. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Keep
exactly.
going. Yeah.
And so the problem is when there's splitting, then we get knocked off our pedestal. We go from all good to all bad. Yeah. When that happens, then that high conflict person no longer wants to just divorce us. They want to destroy us. And that is from trauma, right? That is a result of trauma from very young ages. And that's a learned response or a trauma response that can be really dangerous and really scary for my clients. And so that is the purpose. So there are some books by Bill Eddy that, if this is something that's relevant to your audience, there's The 5 Types of Personalities That Can Destroy Your Life by Bill Eddy. And there's another book called Splitting by Bill Eddy. And so my focus when I get, and actually I'll say one more thing if you don't mind.
Please.
What Bill Eddy says is we have to evaluate if this person is a high conflict person. And how we do that scientifically is we ask, that behavior that you noticed that you think is high conflict, would 90% of people engage in that behavior? And there's a reason for that number, and that's because where people are where the statistical analysis is right now is that it used to be 5% of the population were this like narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. It's gone up somewhere between 8 and 11% of the population. So the question is, would 90% of people do that thing? And if the answer is no, then the second question is, because it's so bad, 90% of people wouldn't do it. If the answer is no, then the second question is, does this person have a target of blame or multiple targets of blame? And so the point there is that if you're married to someone who is a high conflict person, you are most likely the target of blame. And so if you're not careful in ending the relationship, splitting can happen. And then that makes the blaming and the abuse that can happen even worse. And so most of my practice is focused on avoiding the splitting that can happen and kind of safely. Oh, that's the question I didn't answer all the way last time, which was finding a way to safely extract my client out of the relationship. Or I think maybe you were going this place. So it's not always about creating a friendship or a relationship with this person. It's about safely extracting oneself out of the relationship and then moving on to a relationship where you really are in an even place, where you're both working from the relationship box with relationship tools, as opposed to somebody who's maybe not able to do that.
Got it. So thank you. When you say, so let me ask this for a little more clarification. What advice would you give to someone who's trying to leave a high conflict relationship? Or steps, or yeah.
I would read. I've had a lot of people read the Splitting book, and then when they've come back to me, they've said that was really important. That there were pieces in that book that were really important for them, or the book about the 5 types of people who can ruin your life. That's important. In the high conflict book, the types of personality types, he talks about when someone is high conflict, it's almost like someone who's an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't give an alcoholic alcohol. You can't give a high conflict person conflict. Oh. And so there's a couple tips there. And one of the tips is that you don't go into past history. These are people that kind of live from that place.
So you don't say well, you always do this, or you did this time when they says you spend too much money, and you're like, well, you went and bought that boat without my permission, or right. Checking in. You don't go back into what they used. Okay.
Exactly. You don't do it. And when they do it, you don't engage. So when they say you always, you don't engage there either. So either way, you don't go into past history. And that's kind of like in the art of war, that's kind of like their territory, their playground. They do better there. So we want to avoid that. We also don't want to say things like, that's it. This is it. I want out. I want a divorce. I want to separate. There's a way to do that where it isn't you initiating it, interestingly. And we want to sort of let them lead this so that they can relax in the knowing that they're the ones leading it. And that avoids splitting. And there's a way to do that. And the other thing we don't want to do is the name calling. You're a narcissist. You're selfish. You're a liar. Those are the kinds of things that are the conflict we don't want to give somebody who's kind of like addicted to conflict.
Oh yeah, because you're feeding the dragon basically.
Exactly.
So
and for splitting, same thing. For splitting, to avoid splitting, it's kind of the same thing. In my opinion, what we want to do to avoid splitting is be really careful about the way the decision is made to separate. And it has to be a meaningful conversation, and it is better if it's their idea. And there's a way to get there.
You're so great, because that's exactly the question I wrote down: is why initiating causes splitting? Why does initiating the divorce cause splitting? And on that, people will say too, if you're the one that files, then you have the upper hand. Is that also true? But so is the initiating would really be the conversation, they say it, then you file, or does it really matter who files?
Not oh my gosh, great question.
Or just,
Super good question.
Yeah.
So the idea of let's get separated. If I say, that's it, that is it, I am done, right?
Yeah.
You can just feel it, right? That is like going to bring up all the fight or flight. For somebody who's high conflict, that's a lot of fight. That is going to put somebody into a place where they're no longer in control. And then they're going to need to feel like they're in control. And that's not safe for me. If I can, there's a lot of ways that I do this with my clients. If I can set it up in a nice way so that it's a safe space, safe conversation where my client can lead that person to have that understanding on their own, and they say it, that's what we're hoping for. And I think even I've read a lot of books about this, and I think even Bill Eddy talks about this, where letting them feel like they're leading the process, and there's a way to do that. So let's say it's the most high conflict case, and let's say that there's actually physical abuse. That's different. That's where we call the police immediately. That's where we get a restraining order. That's where we hire an attorney. That's where we talk to the district attorney. That's different. If it's somebody who has a really hot temper and there's verbal abuse, there is a way to do this where it's hard to give like the play-by-play.
No, I get it.
But you can hear it when I say like, that's it, I'm done, as opposed to this. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I hear that, and I can hear that I don't make you happy. You see, that's different. That's very different. And then just kind of like going into my personal sovereignty about that. What usually happens is those are the kinds of people that are like, that's it, you can leave. And then the next day they're like, never mind, I didn't mean that. And there's things we can do about that too, where it's hard, where you don't allow them to walk that back. And you can say, no, you've said how you feel, and I understand that's how you feel, and I don't make you happy. And there's things that you can do, steps you can take after that to avoid splitting.
Wow, that's incredible. Really incredible. So thank you. That's so helpful. And then, this whole concept of splitting is so fascinating because it does undermine you having your own self-sovereignty, but at the same time, there's part of your neurology that's trying to keep you safe. Yes?
Absolutely, because the concept, we split from our own selves as well. This is a universal thing. This is important in the workplace with our bosses to avoid splitting. This is important with our parents when we go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas, to avoid splitting or to avoid creating more conflict. It's important with, people that we meet out in the world that appear to be high conflict people. So it is the comment that I've gotten is it feels duplicitous, right? Because you're having a certain kind of languaging and you're not allowed to argue back. But when we think about our personal sovereignty, right, and our real authentic self-expression, the arguing back isn't really our heart's wisdom. It's
Yeah.
actually this place of being in rapport with ourselves from a calm, regulated nervous system to be able to say the things that we eventually will say once we focus on this and bring it to conscious awareness. And when we start practicing it, then that can be who we become. And then we're not in a place of feeling like we have to enable others and be codependent with others, which is a great definition of personal sovereignty, right? It's actually a really, that freedom from enabling and codependency is new for a lot of people. And when they practice it, it becomes, oh, I see. Okay, this is what I want. And then once they leave that partner, they can start their new normal in that way.
Yes. Oh my God, that's so beautiful. Thank you, Karina. It's amazing work. And it reminds me of um, like my losing my self sovereignty in my own family's dynamic. Yet with my 5-year-old, I can really hold space. I can let him have a tantrum about, not having a treat or, you know, right before bed and all that stuff. And you're just like, okay, I see you're upset. And you just hold it. And then he kind of gives up and, it's out and we kind of go back, right? Like children are so close to that neurology. They're so in it. And as adults, as parents, we kind of hold that space. And because I know it's going to end, that's the difference. I think what was harder in the high conflict with situations I've been in with adults versus with children. I know the children are going to get over the tantrum.
But see, that's so important what you're saying, because I can't tell you how many times I've said to a client, do you see how that's him or her on the floor of Safeway, screaming and crying, banging the floor, wanting a Snickers? Do you see that? Okay. So many of these high conflict people, and it's hard to see that when it's your spouse. It's so hard to have that objectivity, which is why it's nice to have a coach or a friend who can say, who can see the 3-year-old, the age regression. Because, it's really what happens. It is age regression. It is 0 to 3 years old that you're witnessing when somebody goes to fight or flight. And if we can remember that, that's a really good way to give them the pause to allow them to re-regulate their nervous system. There is something I can tell you that's really kind of cool called magical co-regulation, if you want me to tell you that.
Yes, can you do it quickly? Because we're almost out of time. Okay.
Yes, I'll do it like this. Someone walks in the kitchen, they're clearly dysregulated and they want something from you. You can go to dysregulation. You can dysregulate yourself. And sometimes that's the safest thing to do, which is like playing possum, like I'm not a threat to you. You can also, if it's safe, realize you were just fine a minute ago. You were breathing normally. You were regulated. You can stand a little taller and take a deep breath and say, you seem like you're not regulated. You can mirror off of my mirroring neurons. And re-regulate off of my mirroring neurons. That's a beautiful thing to do for people when we can hold them in that way that they seem like a 3-year-old right now, when it's safe to do so.
Wow, that is so great. Thank you, Karina.
Magical co-regulation.
I love it. Okay, my last question for you as we're getting ready to wrap up. How do you live your wealthy self life?
Oh, that just sounds so good. How I live my wealthy self life is, gosh, and you've helped me with this if you want to know the truth. I visualize it. First, I have to visualize it. I see it out there, and then I go for it. And I really think that has a lot to do with it. Again, with the theme of bringing things to the conscious level, those things that I wasn't sure were possibilities, I get curious about it. And I visualize it and see it happening and bring it to the conscious level. And then I watch it unfold. And that's something I've learned from you, Regina.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Well, thank you, Karina, for being here with us today. And thank you for all the incredible work that you are doing to guide women into their newfound independence and having them fulfill their life that they designed with their self-sovereignty. If you would like to get a hold of Karina and chat with her more on hire her services, she is at www.karinatrowbridge.com. And if you got something out of today's show, please share it. There is enough fear and anger and hurt in the world. Let's bring in more joy and happiness. And also, if you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Please send them to yourwealthyself@e360tvlive.com. I love and adore you. You're an incredibly beautiful and precious beings. And please know you are enough, just as you are, to have all that you desire that's important to you. And I will see you next week.